What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosi. I'm joined by my friend and co-host Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you today?
Doing wonderful. Hey, everybody. Thanks once again for listening in to us today. I'm kind of excited about this podcast, a little bit different than what we've normally done. But please tell your friends about us. Any questions you have, anything you want us to discuss, any guests that you know that we should talk about, or even you, if you want to get on our podcast and have something that you're passionate about, that especially around health and fitness, let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, we have certainly had listeners on. That has 100% happened. But I wanted to start, Keoni, before we get into our topic for today, call back to our episode last week on oral health, periodontal disease, gingivitis, those sorts of things. So for just the layman, the everyday person, they're out and about on a date, or they need to freshen up their breath before an interview or something like that. What are some of those, what do you recommend, or what are some of those really good natural options as opposed to, gum across the counter at the convenience store sort of thing?
Right. One of the things that I do, and I tend to carry it around with me, is just some clove bud. Just pop a clove bud in your mouth. It freshens your breath. It actually cleans your mouth, has antimicrobial activity. And that's one of the easiest things to do. I carry some in my car.
Is this a product, Keoni, or is it like the clove blood you put it in a jar or something?
No, it's all it is the spice. You can find it at any food store in the spice rack, and it's the actual clove bud. You'll find it during Christmas, used in hams and things like that, and maybe like hot apple cider. It helps spice that up. But yeah, just sucking on clove bud, and you can chew it and swallow it, or suck on it, and it freshens your breath almost immediately. And then, and then the other thing, my favorite chewing gum too, if you're going to go that route, is find a chewing gum that contains like a natural sugar alcohol, but the best one is xylitol.
Yeah.
So xylitol, xylitol is the best one. Do that because we know that xylitol helps not only clean the mouth, but it may even, like minor like scrapes or nicks on your teeth, even minor cavities, it can help remineralize from what they're showing. And then it also keeps the bad bacteria away that create acid that causes the degradation of the teeth. So I think that's the best type of chewing gum. If you can't find any, don't have any of that, then really almost any sugarless chewing gum will be good also.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great order there. And anyone can just go to the store, like you mentioned, get clove bud. Do they want, when they go, if they've never bought it before, and they go to someone at Whole Foods, they say, hey, I'm looking
go
for
to the
clove
spice
bud.
rack. Yep, go to the spice rack, clove bud. They're just little buds, and you can suck on them and chew on them. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, then happy chewing, and then we'll do a TMJ episode here in a few weeks.
Yeah, and it's great. Clove bud is great because it will numb out pain too. So I use, I'll tell my patients, the dentist that have tooth pain, use that, because a lot of times it can help quell or kill an infection, but also it numbs out the pain.
Okay, yeah, awesome. All right, Keoni. So what are we talking about today? I know it's well, people might be able to go on your Facebook and kind of see some of the stuff we're about to talk about.
Oh yeah, so
we'll take it from there.
Right. No, totally. Yes, that's exactly right. Well, I want to talk about the term scientism, and I have been accused of this a lot. And unfortunately, Brian, I know since you're associated with me and we do this podcast together, they're probably going to accuse you of scientism too. So I think we should talk about it and discuss what people mean by that term.
Yeah,
right?
I haven't heard it. So.
Oh, okay.
All right. I'm brand new to this. People are yelling at me, and I'm just floating through the world, not bothered.
Don't tell them you know. Don't tell them you know me. Okay.
I think it's too late for that episode 2.
Yeah, right. No, it is. Well, as you can infer, it's a term. It's a term of abuse. It's usually used in the pejorative sense, right? So, it's kind of used with people where it's all about science, using data to back up your I don't know, worldview, or
God damn,
or using right, or using using empiricism to gain objective knowledge and raising it to the level of almost like a deity in a sense. It's like that's your whole world view. That science is the only way to gain knowledge. So on the surface, that sounds like, well, I'm not that boring where I'm just like always about objective data and facts and stuff. But as part of this podcast, one of the things that we're doing is we are really just here. We're doing a form of science, really, right, Brian? We're discussing things. We're putting out information that is certainly not original to us, although we discuss it, may have ideas about it. But it is a form of discussing and debating, which is also a form of science in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's sort of this grab bag of desperate accusations that's mostly overblown. And I get accused of it a lot because I will post stuff on social media about, science or, my views on religion and stuff like that. And of course, when you post something that is deemed by the person accusing you of scientism that they're triggered or offended by, of course, you're going to get this term thrown out to you. But the more I thought about this term is that what are people actually saying? So I think it's defined in one of these three ways, or maybe a combination of these. Number one, so science is the sole source of reliable facts about the universe. All right. Scientism could also mean the humanities should be, underneath or subsumed by the rubric, of science. Right. So that's one definition. So that, to me, that's not so bad. Number two, it refers to the idea that questions that can't be answered by science aren't worth considering or discussing. So we're talking about morality, ways to live, philosophy, emotion, the beauty of emotions, awe-inspiring sceneries, that type of thing. Religion. Okay, not so bad either. And then number three, scientists, are arrogant. They think the only way, I think this is what most people are accusing, when they use the term, that's what they're accusing people of, are arrogant. They lack humility. By the way, I'm not a scientist. I'm a clinician like you are, but we do read the science, and maybe we're more, maybe we're considered more of the scientism ilk because we tend to defer to the paper, whatever we're reading, or the general consensus of what we're gaining information from as the expert, as opposed to us.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in general, people are saying scientists are arrogant. When they're using the term scientism, scientists are arrogant. They lack humility, and they're reluctant to admit their findings are wrong. I think another definition
this is what people are saying scientism is, because I just hearing some of this, it's like, well, in my opinion, scientists are more than happy to admit that their findings are wrong, and that's kind of the whole name of the game. So this is right. What creates the idea of scientism and this negative stigma around it, is what you're saying. These definitions, these thought patterns.
Right. But let's take that a little bit further with what you just said. You said science is based around this whole kind of debate atmosphere. I mean, yes, it is a way to gain objective data. You come up with theories in science, and then you try to falsify those theories. So now you try to do all this experimentation to see if that theory is correct. And so we have the theory of evolution, right? And to people in layman's terms, theory means, well, it's just kind of an opinion. And that is absolutely not what theory means in science. It basically means, it's basically a fact until it can be falsified. And we try to falsify. I mean, there are scientists every day bringing out new data that are trying to falsify the theory of gravity, the theory of evolution, and yet they cannot. And if they did, guess what's going to happen? whoever did that is going to win the Nobel Peace Prize. I can guarantee that, if they can actually falsify it and come to a really good objective understanding that that was completely wrong.
Mm.
But your point is well taken, whereas science is also, because of that falsification process, what are scientists trying to do? They are constantly discussing and saying, hey, have you thought about it this way? Have you thought about it this way? Well, that can't be right. Have you thought about it this way? Through their various papers and everything like that. And over time, they come to a consensus. So when I think of scientism in relation to religion, where religion will speak or have true statements that are unfalsifiable. So what I mean by that is, so here's a truth statement in Christianity, all right? And this is literal interpretation. So I know some people will get upset about this because they'll say it's all metaphor, but I'll speak to that in just a second. But
what is a true statement, Keoni?
So here's a true statement in Christianity.
You're saying like this is a true statement.
This is a statement that Christianity has said, or at least puts out that it's true.
Okay.
Adam and Eve, all right, here it is. Adam and Eve are the first humans on the planet, and they are created by God. That's a true statement.
Right, naturally.
All right, that's a true statement. But how can you falsify that true statement?
How can you disprove it, essentially, is the challenge. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, like, the universe was created by a God.
Mm-hmm.
That's invisible and unknowing and all that. So how can you can't challenge that. You can't falsify that. There's I don't know of an experiment where you can come up with to falsify that. That's not to say science and religion can't coexist, but they can. Sure. They need to coexist in a way that they stay in their respective, realms, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So science is a way that we can gain objective data. Religion may be a way of, coming to terms with the meaning of life, giving people hope, so on and so on. I just don't see those two as being, compatible in the sense that you can use scientific method with science, or you can just make up a true statement and say that that's true based on, if all your evidence is based on that it's in this religious text, right?
Sure.
All right. So anyway, so what I'm saying here is with, when people accuse somebody of scientism, it's usually in a pejorative sense, and it usually relates to, well, okay, is that the same thing as religionism? There's another term we can use, religionism. Is it the same thing as, like, your whole worldview is built around science, where that's the only way you see the world? You're a materialistic person. You don't see anything other than that. You can't see beauty in the world, so on and so on. And basically, when you die, you just become this entropic soup of molecules, so on and so on. And there's no beauty or meaning in the world. I think that's where people are going with that term. And therefore, you are a person that is, at least in your worldview, not desirable compared to my belief system, right? And so, yes, you can be a scientist and still have a religious viewpoint, but the whole term of scientism as being accused of that's your whole worldview, I don't know of any scientist who is actually like that. This is my whole term. Like, you can lead a satisfying life believing in the method of science. You can lead a satisfying life believing in the method of science and find meaning in life, not believing in a God or being an atheist, being an agnostic. Mm-hmm. But anyway, let's just look at each one of these claims real quick. All right. So the first one, science is the sole source of reliable facts about the universe. Scientism could also mean that humanity should be underneath the rubric of science. Well, we know this. Science is the only way And I don't know of any other way unless you do. I mean, maybe somebody will comment on this podcast and let us know, but it's the only way to gain objective knowledge as opposed to subjective knowledge. I mean, I don't know how else you're going to understand the world without using the scientific method. I mean, we can't just make stuff up, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
right. Keoni, where are these 3 points, these 1, 2, 3 that we're working through right now? And the one you just said is the science is the sole source of reliable facts about the universe. Talking about being under the rubric of science. Is this something from a website that talks about scientism? Is this in your experience of interacting with people who are kind of referring to you as scientism person, as one of those isms? Are these kind of the 3 points you've deducted?
Right. It's both. Actually, it's also from reading books about, science and religion and stuff like that. In fact, I think a really good book to read that kind of goes into this is a book called Faith versus Fact by Jerry Coyne. It's an excellent book, whether you agree with him or not. It's still a really good book to read.
How do you know how long that is, Keoni? Because when you and I first started talking, you suggested the God delusion to me, and I read about 50 pages of that and was like, all right, I agree with you. Put that book down. I don't need another 500.
It's shorter than that.
God delusion.
yeah.
Jesus, buddy, get over it.
Right. It's shorter than that. Much shorter than that.
I'll check that out.
But yes, this one's a pretty good book there. And actually, I think who wrote the God delusion? Was that
Richard Dawkins?
Was it Richard Dawkins?
Yeah, I'm literally staring at it on my.
Oh, okay, right okay, yeah. So again, he is like the one of the 4 horsemen of atheism, and probably I'm accused of scientism his every time he's on social media based on his views.
Have you ever seen? I'm sorry to pivot a little, but there's 2 South Park episodes called like Go God Go and Go God Go 12, and they are like essentially what happens when science, like it's the religion stops and everything stops and everyone's very much scientism, everyone's in this ism, and it goes to like 2050 or 100 years in the future.
I have
absolutely hilarious. I mean, it's so funny what they're fighting over, and like now there's no religion, so they have to fight over different things. It's just it's absolutely hilarious.
I gotta check that out. I have to check that out. That's South Park. I'm surprised.
South Park, Go God Go, and there's 2 episodes that are like,
all right, I'm definitely watching.
Hilarious.
I would definitely watch that. I'm surprised I haven't actually already, because
Richard Dawkins is he's a character of him that they make fun of.
It's a spoof on him. That's great. I will definitely watch it.
It's hilarious, but it's very relevant to this. But okay, I'm sorry.
No, I think that's great. I will definitely watch that. But anyway, that first thing, science is the sole source of reliable facts. Well, yes, I think in that sense, then it's actually a compliment, right? Because science is indeed the only way to gain objective knowledge.
I just have a problem with the second half. Should all of humanities, should all of how we go about our life be under this rubric of science? You can make a case for yes, certainly, but you can, you and I both know, I mean, obviously there's an intangible piece of human beingness that has to be accounted for, that not necessarily is I don't know if it would be best served under the rubric of science, but it would certainly still be positive. Does that make sense?
Right.
There's certainly everything can't be black and white.
Right.
We have emotion, we have different things that happen.
Yeah, and there are some, and I think your point is well taken. There are questions that science cannot probably answer at all. Like you can't answer that, but we know there's something there. I would just say this. So if we were talking about consciousness, right, which I just don't think, I think our whole kind of notion now about consciousness is probably a little bit, we don't know much about it. However, with science, we do know this, like we can't isolate where consciousness comes from in the brain, right? We don't know, there's no locus. So we can also look at somebody's brain as they are thinking something and see what lights up. That's certainly not going to answer anything about consciousness, but it will tell us about the brain. And maybe with enough data, we can know more and more and make a kind of a hypothesis about consciousness based on science. But I think it's one of those things that is just really difficult to know, like what gives us our sense of self, that stuff, what allows us to be thinking and feeling and to know that we are thinking and that we are conscious. I don't think science could ever directly answer that, but it can give us some answers about the physical world and the physical brain and how it works. And that in itself may help with understanding consciousness better. I don't think we could ever know it though. Same with the concept of love too, right? Like we could, love this feeling that I think most of us, if you're lucky enough, have felt, or know what people are talking about when they say, I'm in love with this person, or I love this or that. You can actually do like fMRI scan and see what part of the brain lights up. But does that give you any concrete definition or any data on what love is? No, it doesn't. But it can give you some information of how the brain works in relation to feelings of love.
Right. And
and I would say go ahead.
Science is demonstrating these things. We're able to see these things, but they don't necessarily, some of these things like love, for example, are unquantifiable. Or I think about a situation where, some, doomsday presidential situation where it's like his family and his wife he's got to save, or he hits this button and he saves 100 people in a shopping mall or whatever the case might be.
Right.
And science would say, well, you save 100 people, you as a human being in your own life would sit there and look at your family and 90% chance save them. And these are science, clearly science, logic.
Logically you would, with using pure logic, you would choose to say the most people, most people, all things being equal, but all things aren't equal.
Right. Your conscious, your personality, the things that are unquantifiable within science are these wild cards that create the beauty of life that I guess we're living.
Right. It's a whole train experiments, right, in psychology, right, where trains coming down the track, right, and there's a person on the track, but if you are the observer and there's somebody standing beside you, let's say there's 4 or 5 people tied to the track, right, all right, and the train's coming down, it's getting ready to hit these people, but you as the observer are standing beside some guy that you can push into the track to stop the train from killing the 4, but instead will kill him. That's a moral dilemma right there. That most people are not going to, it's like not going to take it upon themselves to kill somebody in order to kill, in order to save the lives of 4. Maybe some people, but that's a hard decision. That's kind of like what you're talking about there.
Yeah. Well, it points out how intricately tied this episode is with our morality episode. Well, where do our morals come from? Is it from these religious texts? Is it from scientism, where you think very logically and you find out that this is what's best, or where do they come from? And go back and listen to that. But they definitely seem like they are two sides of the same coin here.
And I gather from like the South Park episode, it's a spoof on that, right? Where everybody is walking around like being Dr. Spock, probably, right? Is that
a little bit? Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit. There's like a whole race of otters that is against the humans because they, it only makes sense to call us the Atheist Alliance. That way, it has 2 A's, and the humans chop down trees and eat on tables when they have perfectly good bellies to eat on. It's not logical, so we must kill them. It's It's hilarious.
I definitely get that. but even speaking about morality, right? So there are you use kind of debate, this moral debate about issues of moral things that can't be completely answered by science, but you still use a form of science to come to closer to the truth. And I will even go into like, how do we get closer to the truth using a form of science? Well, a lot of it comes down to just discussion and debate, which I consider kind of a form of the science, using the scientific method. Even with all the humanities out there. So, like, I don't know, like history, to come up with a historical word, we use a form of science, a discussion. We go back and read, historians go back and read texts and everything else to see what actually happened back then and make their best guesstimate of what actually happened and trying to get close to the truth. So
right.
When I say using a scientific method, it kind of goes into that, even with economics, even with mathematics in a sense. You have these logical results, axioms, or principles that I would say use a form of science too, to get to a better understanding. So anyway, but yeah, so what would a world look like that people are just, everything is based on in the most rational thought process, logical thought process there is? Yeah, it would
it would look a little spockish.
Things would be, and I think it could be a very scary place too.
Yeah, a lot of void of humanity.
But on the other hand, I also think, we're being in a very scary place when people are trying to use truth statements based on just belief alone. So, for example, with the whole COVID debate, right? Like, just not your bias is, vaccines are harmful. Let's say that is, but what is that based on? Is that your bias? Is it because you listen to somebody on the internet that confirmed your bias, and now that's your badge of honor that nobody should get vaxxed,
right?
Or do you look to experts that have actually gone through that, and science is constantly changing and saying, this may help us? I mean, if we lived in a world where the two are equal, that there's consequences that could come about from that. One is based mostly on its evidence-based opinion, where the other one is, based purely evidence-based, based on, the scientific method.
Right.
So you don't want to live in a world like that. And it's seen, and we've seen what can happen with that, where people will ignore, objective data just because of their bias or their point of view, or because some mentor said that, and therefore that's what they believe. So if you're going to make a true statement, I think it behooves us, without being like Dr. Spock, it behooves us to use the scientific method to get a better understanding. And we can use that scientific method to get a better understanding with just about, in my opinion, with just about anything we can. It doesn't mean we're going to get to the truth. Like, when you talk about morality, you talk about religious texts and their symbolism and metaphor, and their meaning and what they mean to that person. That's one thing, but there's also, there's biblical scholarship too. I mean, you have biblical scholars and theologians who debate the ambiguities in religious texts all over the world. That's a form of science, of getting to a better understanding of what it says. You get into trouble though when you pick an ambiguity that you are now claiming truth without any evidence whatsoever to make that true statement.
Sure.
Right. Besides you saying that it said it in this book, and this book is sacred, and this book is divinely inspired.
Sure.
So I just think we have to kind of balance that. But this kind of speaks to the second point, that there are things that can't be answered by science, or can't give you information by science. So our concept of what beauty is. I mean, so like me and you can definitely agree that if we go into a beautiful place that's unpolluted and see a waterfall and it's greenery and the sun shining through the skies and through the forest and everything, me and you can say, wow, you know, that's beautiful. We definitely can say that's beautiful as opposed to a wasteland where there's no life. You know, like think about pictures of Mars. You know, like who would choose to live there? You know, I mean, I know some people choose choose to go there, but you know, you get what I'm saying. It's like,
Yes.
you know, do
Yeah.
you want to live in a nice, beautiful paradise place, or do you want to live in a wasteland? Like even when us humans go to Mars, we are going to terraform it to make it beautiful to standards. I mean, that's what we're going to do. But so what is the how what makes us as humans like that as opposed to that? You know, science may have some answers to that. You know,
Right.
not complete answers, but may have some answers. So it can help inform. You know, why do we look at a artwork and think, wow, that's beautiful, whereas another piece of artwork, somebody may go, yeah, that does nothing to me, or look at a sunset and be awe-inspired, where somebody else in a different frame of mind may not get that awe-inspiring feeling. You
Right.
know, science again can maybe answer a little bit why that. It's not going to capture the whole feeling, or as some people would say, the divinity of that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
How
It reminds me a lot of when we talked about Homo Deus, that book, and it's just science starting to use a lot of history and data to kind of put together how you think and feel. And of
Mhm.
course, it isn't necessarily coming to a truth necessarily, but it is using all this factual based information to kind of figure out where you would fall into play. And then we think about like beauty and things like that you're talking about, and we do
Right.
find more and more and more that as we dive into it with the scientific method, that you know, this jaw structure or this type of thing is more attractive to people because of XYZ.
Yeah.
So it certainly
Yeah.
can't be without science, like we're alluding to.
Right. And you bring up a good point, because what you're talking about with that book Homo Deus, is this whole concept of like on social media, or what was it? I think we were talking about like 300 clicks of your button on a social media website, that algorithm is going to know more about you than you know about yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's another way to use science. To some people that's scary, right? So let's say, and we use this example, or I think the book used this example, where you know, think about this, Brian. So you just got married, right? So you go up, you come to me and say, Keoni, you know, I'm getting married, right? And this AI program, this program on the computer, told me that you know,
This is the best
with my
choice.
300 clicks, that I should or should not get married to Haley,
Uh-huh.
right? As opposed to somebody else. You know, that and objectively, you know, based on the data, you know that is probably more reliable than what you are actually feeling. So, but going on the data without all the other stuff involved is a pretty scary thing, and may not necessarily be right. It may be
Right.
something that you need to go through anyway, whether that computer says such and such. But I do think we are headed to a future, what some people think is scary, where that is going to be how we tend to operate. And we already see it happening, right? On the computer, like 300 clicks there, the computer already knows. Like you get ads targeted to you constantly. Like, you know, after this podcast, I'm sure some,
Yeah.
you know, I'm gonna get all kinds of more scientism memes, maybe, or something heading my way, heading our way. Um, the third claim, we basically talked about the second claim, you know, where, you know, certain things, certain questions can't be answered by science, and people who hold up science as far as scientism goes, or as far as the pejorative meaning of it, you know, can't get a good understanding of morality or ways to live. But that we can get some understanding of all of that with science. It's not all there is, that's for sure. And then, you know, scientists are people. So the fact that saying scientists are arrogant or lack humility, or are reluctant to have their findings wrong, people are human. So yes, there is some of that going on. And there is an inherent thing with humanity where people don't like to be wrong, especially when they're in discussions or debates. And I think as long as people are aware of that, they can, kind of build their worldview and get closer to truth and not be so opinionated in what they are doing. But the actual process of science, where it's reluctant to admit itself being wrong, is actually the very opposite of what it is. I mean, science is trying to admit itself to be wrong in terms to get a better understanding of the world that we live in.
Right, 100%.
So you're trying to falsify that. So, can we answer the question, why does Keoni like chocolate better than vanilla? Like, is there objective data that I can find behind that? Well, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, chocolate's full of these neurochemicals that just make me feel good. So that's why I like it, But it still basically comes down to a choice where I don't think you're going to come up with a lot of objective data to support why I like chocolate and why somebody else likes vanilla. It's a choice. It's just what I choose to like at that time. Maybe science can give us some insight into that, but I don't think it's going to, give us a whole lot of insight. I think the main issue is if we're going to make true statements about things, right? If we're going to claim that there is an invisible, chocolate bar in my closet that gives me happiness every time I go in my closet, and then you come and you look in my closet and go, Keoni, there's no chocolate bar here, and you just say it's not falsifiable. I mean, you just could look at me and go, I can just dismiss what you're saying. You may believe that, but I can just dismiss it because it has no evidence. So any claim made, like that, a true statement, can be easily dismissed if you have no evidence also.
Yeah.
And then this whole other thing where I've heard this term scientism, but what about religionism? I mean, this is, I could use that. We could throw that out at people who have this very religious mindset about their very core beliefs, So and I would put people on the extreme on this. These are people who believe that natural disasters, and I've heard this before. I think you have too, where you hear some preacher or cleric saying, well, San Francisco got hit by a tidal wave because supposedly there's a bunch of homosexuals there. Like that's what I would, pejoratively and rightly so call religionism, or something like God told me that women should not use birth control, or argue that evolution is just a conspiracy theory by scientists. These, I bring these up, and to me and you, this may sound funny, but these are things that people on the extreme and on religionism that will use that term, and it's used in, I've heard it used online in a number of books, is, that's just as easy to throw that out there and just, it's kind of, it can work. It can work in the same way that people are throwing out the scientism term. But I think when you really look at both of those terms and you actually look at the human being accused of that or being the accuser of it, you can't, you have to take it in context and understand where that person is coming from. My only thing is
the religionism person.
Yeah, and the scientism person. Like,
sure.
Is there a stereotypical scientism person out there? I have never met him or her that really is like, science is the only way, there's no other way about there. And then is there really a religionism person out there? Yeah, they can make these statements, but I would also say, I've never met somebody who religion is their only worldview, who doesn't get in their car and drive to work or do something. They're using science at that point. Like, if you're gonna,
okay, sure,
if you're gonna go all the way with your ideology here, your ism with it, then go all the way with it. Like, if you're gonna believe that,
well, I mean, everybody knows God did make the Tesla.
Yeah.
What's his name? Elon Musk is an angel sent
Yeah.
down. So
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yes. But still, you're still not gonna I'm still gonna go out and sit in the backyard, enjoy my garden. I'm still gonna go back and enjoy the beauty of the sunset. It's not all gonna be based on, science. Anyway, both terms are ridiculous. And I bring up the term religionism just to make the point that scientism is kind of a crazy term also, but it's a false term
right.
based on what we're talking about. Um, can I come up with some scientific method to prove that my point there? I don't know, maybe not, but we are using a form of science discussing it right now.
Well, and I think, I think about these religionism based societies, talking about flying through Qatar, can't eat or drink during Ramadan in public. It's a literal crime. Women
Yeah,
have to be covered, those sorts of things. So there are, I guess, countries, areas of the world that are definitely more so, we know this goes without saying, but are, kind of have that religionism is the basis of the country and how it does business and how it conducts
right.
itself and expects the citizens to conduct itself. I'm wondering if there's more of a scientism version, like in Amsterdam or something that's a little bit more the opposite of that, this more scientism version of a culture that we can kind of see and peek at. I don't know if there
It's
is one
really
or not.
well.
You think of like
It's
Singapore, some of these huge little areas that are real
yeah,
free and metropolis like and
yeah,
pushing forward with science and technology and these things.
right. I think your point. I think that's a great point because I think you can look to more
We have a
secular
we have a lot of
societies.
history of those. A lot of history of secular societies. We don't necessarily have that same thing with scientific societies.
Well, I would put them in the same ballpark, though. And the reason why I would is because when you talk about more secular societies, you're also talking about a population that is not so attached to their religion for the most part. And if you're not so attached to your religion, right, then how do you what happens within the politics of that society, right? I would think that those societies are then going to be more likely to be swayed by objective data when making their decisions, right? This is the whole thing about separation of church and state. And
Mm-hmm.
and in my opinion, that's a good thing
Mm-hmm.
because anytime you are making true statements based on nothing other than a religious text or your opinion, I think that's very can be very, very harmful to do. So a lot of these secular societies also, which I would say would be more closer to, you know, I think some people who are very attached with religion and want to see religion infused into the politics like we are, some people are saying we're starting to see that in the United States right now, especially in, the red
Recently.
states. Yeah,
Yeah.
recently. But as soon as you start doing that and you're not using data to see what happens when you pass laws like that, that can be a big issue. All right. Now, on the other hand, now if the citizens of a society, like let's say in the Middle East, let's say in Saudi Arabia, um, again, if I'm saying the citizens, now this is assuming that, this is not just a, or a country that's ruled by just a few who make all the laws. And I know we can debate that all day. But if the citizens of a country really want to have their society based on a religious text that, if you steal something, your hands should be cut off, or if you commit adultery, then you should be killed, or whatever that is. And this may sound crazy to you, there may be some benefits to that, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
example, in Saudi Arabia, I know some people have lived there. They say it's the safest country in the world to live because you can walk outside in the middle of the night anywhere and be assured that nobody's going to come up and mug you, for one thing,
Right. Right. Right.
especially if you're abiding by those rules, you know. So I would just say that, so it's not necessarily a bad thing to have these countries that fall on one side or another, especially if people globally have the opportunity to to move to those areas that they want to be, right?
Yeah.
So in the United States, so if we want to have states that are based more on religion, which some can make the case that some of the red states may be, or ones that are more secular or based on scientism, like maybe the blue states, or some people would accuse the blue states would be, at least in this country, people can move. But the it's a bigger issue than that, though, because it's like not everybody has the opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
That that's my own thing with that. My contention is that I just feel like science has its own ballpark, religion has kind of its own ballpark, and I just don't see really how these two things can really be compatible when you're making true statements. So, for example, if I'm going to say, we as humans came to be via evolution, and that is a falsifiable theory. And then on the other hand, somebody is going to say, no, that's not how it happened. It's all about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden, literally that. Instead, not, forget about metaphor, okay? Because I know but there are people who literally said, I don't see how those two are compatible. You can't have one or the other or believe in both. I could see how somebody could make the jump from, metaphorically or allegorically from, the story of Genesis to, oh yeah, evolution, and then come to kind of more of a deistic belief where, there's a maker who started it all from the beginning, and then hands off the human experience and the human condition, for the next, as long as our species live. But even that, if you're gonna say that there was a creator, then it's the whole trope of, or it's cliched, right? It's kind of cliche to say, well, okay, so if you believe in a creator that started all, then who created the creator?
Sure.
Or is it possible, as science seems to be, that maybe something actually can come from nothing? Right. So, so we know that like little quarks and these little like small subatomic particles seem to pop in and out of existence. Well, there's some evidence right there that maybe something does come from nothing, or at least in the reality that we're experiencing.
Right.
So I hang my hat. I just don't know. I hang my hat on a scientific method, and again, it has all its downfalls, right? There's money involved, it's bureaucracy, there's politics involved with that. I just think, as a society, that it's potentially a lot less harmful, even though it can steer us down some roads that are wrong at times, but it usually will self-correct. Here's another criticism to the whole scientism thing. So, well, look what science has done. Science has created these weapons of mass destruction, right? That can destroy the planet in no time. And my only comment,
God, but okay.
What's that?
That was actually God that did that, but okay, Keoni, go ahead.
Yes. But man created these things, okay? So, but also men, if we choose to do so, or if somebody crazy chooses to do so, is also going to press the button. There's no, the fault is not on science itself for creating these things. The fault is on the users of science for using it for ill will, right? So then I say, well, where do we go from here? So do we go back to a completely natural state where, I mean, seriously, do we go all the way back to our 20,000 years ago when we were pretty much running around, unclothed, completely intimately tied to what most people call nature, the natural world, running around the woods, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes? Sounds horrific to me. Like we are all, me looking at you, you looking at me, we're all a product of science. I mean, you can't wear that t-shirt without science. I mean, science developed that t-shirt. Same with my hat. I mean,
you're listening to goddamn podcasts right now. Speaking of science.
Right. So I just think we're doing I just think we're doing a disservice to ourselves to kind of beat up on science. But hey, that I will freely admit that's my bias too. But I also want to present it in a way of, where are we truly going to? Where's humanity truly going to gain objective knowledge? What is the best way? Right now, I think it's science. If there's another way, I'm open. I just don't know of another way.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really interesting about this that I really love about science is that science and the method of it is the same wherever you go all over the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Universal
Unlike
language.
religion. So I can go to any country in the world, and if I'm going to practice science, to figure out some information or to gain knowledge, I'm going to use the same type of method that has been outlined to use.
Yeah.
And people will say, scientific method. This is another point I want to bring up, is the scientific method is just a relatively recent phenomenon, and I've even heard some people say, well, it stemmed out of Christianity. Maybe, but it's in our nature, like with morality. We use empiricism as creatures. We use our senses to understand the world. We've been doing that for however long we've been on the planet, In traditional Chinese medicine, for them to come up with all those herbal formulas, or the acupuncture meridians or anything like that, they basically used clinical observation over thousands of years to come to a better understanding of what herbs and what points work and things like that. That's all kind of a method of science, whether they called it that or not at the time.
Yeah. As always, it seems like the answer is somewhere in the middle. We couldn't have a beautiful society like we're working on having without both of them. Now, obviously, when we get stuck on really far ends is where we're talking about in this podcast, but obviously somewhere in the middle is going to bring the humanity that we're looking for, and also the progression with, some real factual challenged based thought processes that are going to get us to where we want to be, hopefully.
Right. And I think we can get there quickly. And this is just me speaking off the top of my head and its opinion. I think we can get there quickly by keeping them in their own little realms. Like, that's not to say people can't believe in both. But I think, when we're going to make true statements about one or the other, one is true, one is not true. I mean, it's true and false. So again, that's where I go with that type of thing. And I just don't see how the two can intertwine or coexist as methods of coming to objective data. Let me put it that way. And objective data is the key word there.
So for some guy I know on Facebook who posts that there are only two genders and he can prove it, and his proof is that it says that in the Bible. To me, there are, okay, that is scientism, could help prove his point with religionism, and they can kind of coercively work together to prove his point against what you just said, in my opinion, in that small example, where they both are being used together to
in that sense, yes. But if that person says that there are only two genders, period, and the reason why is because it says it in that book,
yes,
then that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, 100%.
That's my only point. So yeah, I think they can. I think they can definitely coexist to help give us meaning to life and understanding life in an objective way. I think they can coexist in that way. So I get your
also
point.
say, Keoni, we don't have a choice. They have to coexist with the way we are. I mean, there's no way around it. Go to Facebook right now and you're bound to find that post I just talked about or something like that really quickly.
Yeah, and I will say this also. I would say the one thing about science that I think all of us can kind of learn from is to not stop the debate, no matter what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like
I
keep
like
the
that.
discussion going.
Yeah, I definitely like that.
Because as soon as you stop the debate, it's like that cliche thing. Well, we're just gonna have to agree to disagree. No, we don't have to. We can keep talking about it, and trying to understand each other.
Yeah.
So and I think science is a better model for doing that, because it is constantly trying to gain a better understanding, a deeper understanding. Instead of just saying this is the way it is.
Right, 100%. And there really is something to that. And I think I don't know what episode I was talking about it in regards to, but like the rigors of going through, like for me, a doctorate program in PT school, and constantly being questioned as to why you think this way. It wasn't enough to give an answer. An answer isn't correct without 10 logical ladder points of how you got to this conclusion and why that conclusion is correct in your situation. And that's, as I talk to patients, just like a quick example is like, should I use ice or heat? And it's like, well, it really depends on these 10 factors. And each time you have to know how to consider all these things and make it, deduce what your situation is right there, what the purpose is of this. And then it will lead you to the right path. It's never just very cleanly, hey, I'm dealing with A, so I need to do B, and then I'll have a C result. It just
right. As opposed to you going into your studies or your course there, and your professor goes, this is the way it is, and the reason it is, or this is the way it is, yeah, and this is why, and giving you all the reasons, as opposed to this is the way it is because it says in this book that was written 10,000 years ago, period. Right, and don't question that. And don't question that. I know that's an extreme example, but there are some people who kind of are on that extreme, and we're talking about extremes here. I think when people are being accused of scientism, they're really they're unfairly grouping all scientists together there. Just like if we're talking about religionism, we're unfairly grouping all people who have a religion and believe that religion to be the one and only. But on the extremes, it can get to that point, right? Where
certainly,
think back to where, luckily, we live in a society where you can discuss, or you can, state your opinion without worrying about being accused of heresy and being burned at the stake, like Giordano Bruno was, when he thought, that there are many stars as opposed to one, and we're not the center of the universe, and so on and so on. Thank goodness we don't live there. But like you said before, there are societies that
you're not allowed to have that opinion.
When religion infuses like a society in that way, when people look at Afghanistan and say, look, they're using religious text to run their government, and look what's happening to women, you can see how poisonous that is. Or here, and I'll give it another example in the United States, right? So there are some religious denominations that believe that blood transfusions are an absolute no-no, right?
Mm-hmm.
So based on their belief, and there's stories of this, and again, these are rare, but there are stories of this where a family is actually sacrificing their child because they won't give that child a much needed blood transfusion. That is religionism, as I would define it in the pejorative sense, when you start going to that place. Or you have a life-saving cancer treatment. You have a life-saving cancer treatment that you just based on your religious belief, you're not going to use, because it shouldn't be that. Now I understand if you're an adult and you want to do that, that's great, but a child who can't make that decision for, it's a whole different story, from a moral story there. So
yeah, I just can't help but think about like all the times I've been like a 12-week plan of care with some patient after this insane rehab situation, or they had something happen, and then we get to the end of it and they're good to go, everything's rock and rolling, and they are just so grateful to God for doing all this. And I'm like, you did the work, you did it. Every time I'm like, you did this, you did it, guided you along the way, and you did it. But okay, yes.
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 Yes, I chuckle at that too, because I get that a lot too.
Now,
well,
Keoni,
there you go.
what is the Why do you want to kerfuffle people on Facebook, I guess? Because this is not something that you always did. I feel like now it is you enjoy going on there and just like putting out an opinion, watching the fire in the comments, and then like injecting occasional things within the comments.
Oh yeah,
What's
yeah.
going on?
Well, so what the thing that's going on there is, it is it is a great platform for debate. I also I think for discussing things. I think it is a great platform to also get an idea of the human condition. And what I mean by that is, um, it's always telling. So if somebody's having road rage, right? It's
Mhm.
always, they're in their car, they're surrounded by this metal box, they're protected, and that's when they have road rage. So it's telling about somebody that is road raging and internet raging when they would never say that actually to your face.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my ethics on Facebook, and I have very strong beliefs, especially around religion and science. Hence, that's why I want to talk about this today. But I think it goes back to the debate. And if you look at it as a learning process, as and not as a way to, you know, boost your own ego or anything like that, although I've been accused of that plenty of times, which is fine. And you don't get all bent out of shape and try to understand what people are doing. And you go into it with the belief that generally all people are good, and your belief may not be the truth. And if you go into it thinking, well, I want to get close to the truth and I want to gain knowledge from interacting with people and discussing things, then I think those social media things can be very good. If you go on there and it just stresses you out, and
Mhm.
you feel like you're being I don't know, verbally abused or beat up and stuff, yeah, it's definitely not a platform for to use, especially if you're going to go on there and put opinions on there, because it doesn't matter what opinion you put on there, you put it out to the world, there's going to be somebody who disagrees with you,
100%. Yeah.
no matter what you say. So for me, it's kind of a learning tool,
Yeah.
so and I actually go into it with I really enjoy talking to a number of people that can strongly disagree with me in a way without coming at me with pejorative language and just being rude about it.
Yeah. To
You know,
actually have a point.
and I got to check myself on that too, to
Certainly.
where I don't take anything too serious.
Yeah.
Like I don't get all bent out of shape at it, but I like it. But it's not for everybody. That's for sure. But I do see it as a good learning tool, and I do see it as building community for people. I mean,
Go to
I
your page and
do.
let me know what community that is.
Well,
You're
it's
right. You're
like
right.
the people who are on your page, you do kind of build a little bit of a community there, right?
Yeah, no, 100%.
So
Yours is a
right.
community of people who are there to have these types of debates and
Well,
all
it's
that. You
also
have
community.
crafted
It's
that.
also, and here's the thing, it's also like your own personal Facebook page is like it's analogous to your house, and you're inviting people in. So I certainly, I would think it'd be very rude of me to go to somebody else's Facebook page and post my opinions on their page. I
Hmm.
mean, to me,
It's
it's
an
like
interesting way to look at it.
me going into somebody's house and posting, changing the artwork in the house because that's the
Yeah.
way I like it, and then leaving.
Yeah.
you
To your
know
spaghetti monster photos.
yeah, right,
Watch
right,
them all.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're posting those all over the place. And but no, I think it is if people can just not take each other too seriously, I think it's a good learning platform to understand the human condition, honestly.
Yeah. I think you and Jeremy, friend on the cryptocurrency episode, do a good job of enjoying Facebook for that. I enjoy
Yeah.
sitting back and reading through. I don't enjoy participating, so I do not, but I do enjoy reading that. So it is interesting.
And I can honestly say, Brian, I can honestly say, and maybe I should say this at some point, but I can honestly say like I really enjoy the people more that come onto my Facebook page and disagree with me, and they disagree with me I get much more out of it, and I learn more. So there are a few people that I'm constantly going back and forth with that I don't want to lose, because I think I find their worldviews very interesting.
Absolutely. And this is, there certainly is an ego that can be around science, but this is what you want, that constant challenging and questioning of your own beliefs and having to reinvestigate them and look at them. And that's kind of what I'm alluring to with me talking about PT school, where it's, you state an opinion, they tell you how wrong you are, and you have to deduce why you're correct 1,000 times,
right.
and kind of stand on this hill and use real factual knowledge to express it. And that for me was a transformative, 2 or 3 years to experience that, to reach like another level of, and I think it has, I wish I could do it better, and I'm working on that, but it has created where, like for my Haley, I'm like, well, why do you think that? Why is this? And I'm constantly kind of questioning this way just to see why people are arriving at the conclusions they're arriving to, which is science. And to me, yes, certainly scientists can develop an ego, and like, I kind of think of like a Richard Dawkins type, where he's just going off and he's so right, he can't be told he's not wrong in any way, whatever. But at the flip side, science truly is a constant. I had a professor at Auburn who told me a career in science is a career in constant failure and constantly being wrong and continually searching for the truth. It's just constantly being wrong, figuring out why you're wrong, and trying to work closer towards being right. And he said that is
and trying, but also
it's like that's what I do.
But also trying to be wrong. But also trying to be wrong. Also trying to be wrong. And this also reminds me of this is what killed him too. But this also reminds me of the story of Socrates, right? You know what kind of man he was, right? He was a man who was constantly searching for truth, but he just walk up to people on the street of Athens and start grilling them, and he probably came across like a Richard Dawkins type and be like, well, that can't be right. Why do you think that? Why do you think that? After a while, everybody in Athens came across him, just thought he was an asshole.
And I'm getting close to that. I got to figure it out how to be a little less Socrates style.
Right. And I'm getting close to that too. But what he was is he used this method to get closer to figuring out truth. And the only way he could do that was by discussing these things that he was talking about constantly, and some people, again, this is like checking your ego. Like some people take offense to that. Like, I don't, he certainly wasn't, from what I've read, like from Plato's writings, he certainly wasn't somebody who would be like, you're wrong and that's it, and I'm right. It's not that type of thing. It's more of him asking questions to get a better understanding. And some people don't like that, and that's one thing I would in defense of Richard Dawkins. I think overall he's great, but in defense of him, I would just say that I don't think I've ever heard him say something like that, even though he may come across forceful with his beliefs. Like there's a difference between coming across forceful with your beliefs and then just telling somebody that, you're just ignorant and wrong and I'm right. Now, if the person who is talking to me or you or Richard Dawkins because they don't like our opinion, just want to come to that conclusion, well, that's unfortunately, that's the decision they made up in their mind. It's not something I could ever imagine you or me doing to anybody and saying, no, you suck, you're wrong.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just not going to do that and why am I not going to do that? Because honestly, I don't know if I'm actually right.
Right.
I'm just trying to find out if I'm actually right. And I think if people keep that in their mind, they can keep their ego in check, 100%. So I deal on Facebook with the human condition. We deal with it if we get into a disagreement with our spouses or friends or whatever. That's the same type of thing. What's their point of view and can you understand it? And the human condition, we're all guilty of it, is like, well, my ego can't say that I'm wrong yet. And I think we got to remind ourselves that our ego needs to say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we absolutely could be wrong, and we actually could be viewing the world in a completely warped way.
Yeah. And the more married you are to your belief and upset by being wrong, maybe the closer you are to an ism. on whatever
Right.
side that is. So check yourself.
Right.
before
And
you
that's
wreck
the thing.
yourself.
I think people throw out those isms like scientism or religionism in a pejorative sense, in an insulting way. And rarely are they true. That's all.
That was fun.
Yeah.
That was fun. Anything else, Keoni?
No, I'm just gonna go piss people off on Facebook right now. I'll be
Just gonna go walk the streets of Winston-Salem. Why do you believe it?
and
Wait outside a church.
Just come up to people and be like, let me tell you about life.
Yes.
And if you think otherwise, you're wrong.
Well, what's funny about that is I think I got a Jehovah's Witness guy who knocked on the door like 3 or 4 days ago. And I mean, that was his sentiment. So it was working for him. He was going door to door with that sentiment.
Good. Well, at least you didn't find it insulting. No. Did you invite him in for tea or something? Or
I didn't invite him in, believe it or not. Did not invite him in. He knocked at the wrong time.
Sometimes those discussions can be really, really fun.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. If you know someone who'd be interested in this type of conversation, please send them the episode. Let them know about the Wellman's podcast. A lot of topics. I think this is episode like 209 now. So we got 209 episodes, variety of health topics, wellness topics, financial wellness topics, and things to kind of get you started and get you moving in the right direction. And we are happy to help in any way that we can.
Yes. And definitely go watch that South Park episode. I'm going to do that. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Until next week, be well.